want no more. People getting angry.
There was somebody blasting out a ghetto blaster, you know? And that old Specials record, you know, Ghost Town, you know, was booming out all the time, you know. So people were rioting to music, and that was very surreal. That was very, very surreal. And reality was not reality anymore. Kingsley Road, Parliament Street, was where it used to start most nights. And as it would go dusk, more and more people would meet up. People would turn up with wheelbarrows off building sites with bricks and stuff like that, you know, ammunition ready-made. And then the police would congregate in their numbers, two opposing forces, and it would just spontaneously ignite every night.
The long hot summer of 1981, and the nation was celebrating a great royal wedding. But on the streets of Liverpool 8, anger was in the air, and civil war had been declared.
The street itself strangely quiet now. The rioters, for the moment anyway, gone. The Rialto still burning.
It's like Los Angeles or something with the smog, you know. All them fires.
The scale of the destruction along Liverpool's Upper Parliament Street had only been matched in living memory by the Blitz of World War II. The city was counting the cost. Scores of buildings were in flames. More than 500 people were under arrest, and the same number of injured police officers had been taken into the city's hospitals.
The outside world tried to say it was Armageddon and all of these kind of things, and you know, it was just normal people who've been heavily oppressed socially, economically. I'm not even going to go into all the ways in which they were oppressed, but it's well known, it's documented.
These things don't happen in a vacuum. They happen because people in the end lose their patience. The anger builds up, the tension builds up. They're not getting a hearing about the issues they're angry about. And so in the end, it's not that I think people deliberately say, let's go out and start a riot. It's a bit like the current situation in Oldham and Bradford and Leeds. And I remember always what Martin Luther King said about race riots. He said something which I think is something that people need to take on board, and that riots are the language of the unheard. In other words, people don't get a listening, and they find in the end they have to go on the streets to get people to listen.
What people are concerned about, have been all the time, are still now, is the police. The policing of this area, nothing else. Mr. Heseltine wanted to talk about other things like unemployment. He wanted to talk about housing and resources. Of course people want good housing, and of course people want jobs, but people weren't talking about that. What bugs people is the fact that police harassment, which has been told time and time again to the press and to politicians in this area, but nobody's ever taken any notice, and you've seen the result. Those riots were the result of continual police harassment over years.
Looking back, I remember, it was suffragettes. They were to blame. They broke windows. They set houses on fire. They did all the normal things that go with rioting and protest. That's where I came in. That was what taught me what it feels like not to be listened to, not to have no means of making yourself heard. And once you've grasped that, it's easy to understand. And the utter injustice of it bit right into my soul, I think. And that's been what has driven me ever since.
I think it's pretty common knowledge now of what happened and what sparked the riots. I mean, heavy policing over a period of time, a long period of time, where we'd been continually telling the police about these issues, sparked with one particular incident where it took probably 3 vans of police to arrest one young man for a motorbike offence, or an alleged motorbike offence. The subsequent sort of problems around that when young people started to sort of attack police vehicles, and then police then going back the next day and sort of arresting people in the daytime. Now, for the young people, the issues for them weren't jobs. They went through the housing. They were to do with the situation they faced in relation to the policing. The other things about housing and jobs and education. They said to me, well, that's not the issue. The issue is the police.
Feelings were already fairly high, I suppose you could say, from a political perspective. Feelings were very high against the police. And so 1980, in many ways, was a year where confrontation always seemed to be around the corner. I mean, it was always somebody coming, did you hear that so-and-so had just been beaten up by the police, or did you hear that so-and-so had just been beaten up? And these are the stories which I'd been hearing all my life anyway, and I was still hearing them in 1980. So the events of July 1981, it's always said that one particular person ignited the flame, so to speak. But to me, that person could have been anybody. That person just happened to be the person who was there at that particular time. But it could have been anybody who started that flame, because emotions and feelings and the frustration against the police were they were visible. I mean, just through the community grapevine, so to speak, of the view. So it was no surprise to me. The only surprise to me about the riots was the extent of them. I've never envisaged it could have got to where the level it got to, but the actual conflict and the confrontation between police and local people was no surprise to me.
My perception of the riots, whereas somebody who is an onlooker, a passerby, if you like, and I would be a terrible liar to say that I was actually involved in them, because basically I didn't live in the community, although I was there often. The key thing I can always remember is driving along Mulgrave Street and seeing a policeman surrounded by a lot of angry youth, and it was looking sort of like quite ugly. And I found out later on that they'd arrested somebody unfairly, and the whole thing it sort of like gone off. But I always remember thinking, when I seen that, this has been coming for a long time, and it's here.
To understand the tension that was going on between like the police and the people in Liverpool 8, you have to live within the community, because it was there, especially like weekends, people going to town, coming back, being harassed by the police and all that for no reason at all.
I was surprised that it had taken so long. Our own experiences away from the street sometimes left me sort of like dumbfounded, getting sort of like dragged out of your car, spread eagle against a wall, just for the simple reason that you're black, and you happen to be driving along in a car late at night, which obviously we were returning home from gigs. And this happens now, not so often, but it happens. So if it happens to somebody like us, we're sort of like, by that time we were sort of like pretty mature, that happens to sort of like the youth. An 18-year-old is going to sort of say, I'm not putting up with this, going to lose their tempers, right, end up being done for assault, right, end up with a criminal record. These are the things that make for bad relations in the inner city, and these are the things that eventually lead to riots.
And you've also got to remember that Liverpool 8, or Toxteth as it's called, does not exist in isolation. Obviously, when riot situations occur, other people will get involved in the riots. One of the reactions to the riots was people saying, "Oh, the riots were started by outsiders who came in," and etc. The riots weren't started by outsiders. The riots started within the black community. It involved black people and the police. After that, no doubt, people will come in for their own reasons, be they black or white, because there was one thing about the riots. Anyone who was there can tell you quite clearly that there was both young and old, and there was both black and white. So it wasn't by any means blacks versus the police. If anything, it was people versus the police, although the spark definitely started within the black community, and was basically, it was a culmination of the historical relationship between Merseyside police and black people.
I think for everybody it was essential to be there, you know. The noise was so awesome, you could not have sat in your own house. Anyway, what's that kid? You could never have sat in your own house. And you should walk across the road with that. No, you could never have sat in your own house and listened to the noises that were going on outside, because it was awesome, you know. So, I mean, so all young people and a lot of elders were out on the street. If they weren't partaking, they were observing, they were maybe helping people who were injured, you know, people who were in distress, people who maybe were being attacked unjustly, you know. So there was a lot of people on the street doing different things. People don't understand, but it was a war with police, you know. I have to re-emphasise that. So obviously people only went where policemen were. And of course the police thought that people were going to go into town and, you know, burn the shops and loot and everything else. But I think if you gauge the mood of the crowd, that was the furthest thing from the mind, was, you know, going into town and looting, because it wasn't about gaining things in that respect. It was like, it was a war with the police. It really was a war with the police. I mean, in other cities, for instance, Brixton, they had a big riot there a few weeks later, and, you know, and people burned 60 police vehicles in Brixton, you know, and possibly hospitalised maybe 10, 20 police. But, you know, in Liverpool, over a period of maybe 6 weeks or however long the riots went on, you know, 777 police were put in hospital.
Well, I've got four stitches and a gash above my eyebrow, and I've got a fracture across the jawbone, and I've also got a fracture, break from my socket across to my ear, which is going to have to be wired up in the operation later on. At one particular stage, just before I got injured, I thought there was someone going to get killed.
We were moving up Upper Parliament Street towards a group of youths who had formed a barricade at Grove Street, set several cars on fire there. We intended to disperse them as we reached there. As we moved up there, we came under heavy fire from petrol bombs, rocks, bottles, everything like that. They drove a couple of stolen cars at us by jamming the accelerator and moving towards us. Next thing, I got hit on the shield, fell to the ground, and next thing I woke up in the hospital.
This wasn't a racial situation, this was just an anti-discipline, anti-authority situation.
As far as you're concerned, this wasn't a community reaction, this was a reaction by...
It was a reaction, as I said this morning, by a band of thugs and hooligans who just do not want to live to a civilized system.
I had a family where my father used to be stopped by the police. My brother had been stopped by the police. And now we were getting to a position where my nephews were being stopped by the police, often unnecessarily. They weren't always arrested, but they were stopped. It was harassment. And so, and I guess it was like most black families, you know, we found that wherever you were, whether you were in town or in your own community, you were stopped. My father would be stopped on his way home or to and from work. So we had this history of not feeling the police were our friends. And I'd come in and take part in some of the demonstrations that followed those riots, and because prior to that I'd been community relations officer, so in professional terms I'd had a direct interest. I was the first community relations officer in the city. I was appointed in 1970. So I had a direct interest in all the issues surrounding that and the cause. And one of the earliest things we got involved with as a community relations officer was the police. I remember kids or families turning up daily to the office because their children had been arrested, and quite often for something that they hadn't done or they were accused wrongly. And in fact it was the Community Relations Council which in, I think it was 1971, started the Help on Arrest scheme in Liverpool, and we started talks with the police about their behaviour, their attitude to young black people. It was a very common experience for young black men to be arrested.
Well, you know, they'd seen it that they'd given the police a good hide, and, you know, and that's sort of probably, to any law-abiding normal person in any part of England listening to that statement, you know, it sounds terrible. Of course it sounds terrible, but people are not living here, or still don't even have to live here today, relatively. Police still abuse people, or abuse their power, should I say, you know. So, people just did not know what it was like living in Liverpool 8 and coming into the hands of the police as a black person or a poor white person. Oof. Merseyside police used to plant cannabis on people in the 60s, and a national police force joke was horticulture in Liverpool, they used to call it, and it was a big, you know, big joke. You know, this was, so to speak, our war with the police. It wasn't nothing to do with outside agencies coming in and getting involved and, you know, and maybe, you know, taking things to another dimension, another level, you know. There was people who agitating, for instance, outsiders, that is, agitating to burn the university. Now imagine if that had have happened, you know, how it would have reflected on the people of Liverpool, especially black people, you know, who were excluded outside of education, you know, relatively, they still are today, a lot of the young people.
It's coming like a ghost town.
Listen to the music, hear about a place people call the shady.
This is Liverpool 8, on which we based the trilogy. Obviously Liverpool 8 is what it is. It's all about this area, and this is basically the way it was round about the time we done the album 4 from 8. If I'm right, this, where the sort of like, we see all them bulldozers and everything now, in fact that is actually Stanhope Street. It's like a warning really as to what can happen, and we're hoping that kids will listen to the music and the lyrics and they'll think, well, that's not going to happen to us. We've made the music light, but we've made the words have plenty of meaning.
They wondered what possessed their fear.
We could sense anger and unrest when we were actually writing the songs.
One and only boy.
And when we were writing sort of like these songs, we were angry. You know, we were angry, and we were sort of like expressing ourselves.
Right, listen to the voices, and we'll make it clear just what's really going down today. In Liverpool 8, see, Liverpool 8, the actual song was what opened up the medley. So it was just like sort of giving you the flavour. What we're saying is listen to the voices, listen to what we're saying, or listen what's going to be coming in the next couple of songs, and you'll get a good idea of what's happening in Liverpool 8, just what's really going down today.
Even when we sort of like wrote Liverpool 8, feelings were were starting to get pretty high, because I think I've made this point before, the youth in every generation always express their anger in a shall we say, a heavier way than the generation before.
Any more fields back here?
It was paramilitary, it was like two armies fighting each other. Obviously the police were on the defence. The rioters were always taking the initiative. Nobody calls no names in these situations, but you know, the situation on the street at that time, I remember reflecting later on, was more or less, you know, the same as being at school. You know, so of course at school you've got your prefects, you've got your monitors, you've got your bullies and whatever. And so your bullies or your bigger lads or whatever, they orchestrated. They put into train certain things that, you know, more feebler people would not have done. So these people led by example, you know. You know, so half of these people were in the military. They've been great military leaders, half of them, you know, because they had some great military strategies.
One of the most notable things about it, which I wouldn't have twigged on, is but my dad knew all about it. So, you know, when we were in the army and all this, you learned to do this, that and the other, and they're doing it. He said, just look at the way they do the phone boxes. They don't just vandalise it and, you know, smash a couple of windows and rip the phone out. They break every window systematically. They could stand up on it, on the top, direct people other ways, you know, cut all the phone wires and all that. So it was planned the way they did it. The only unfortunate thing is the police drew the line on the corner where the riot was to stop them going into the town centre.
It's only retrospectively now I can look back and question the police tactics, and could even say that the police tactics escalated the riots, i.e. tactics which were basically one of defence, move back, defend, move back, rather than go forward and maybe trying to bring the riot to an end at an early stage. So if anything, the tactics which the police used appeared to give strength to the riots themselves.
Here it was horrendous. It was like when you watch the stuff on Northern Ireland. I mean, for instance, these lampposts were being demolished one after the other. As the riot was proceeding down the street, somebody had a big massive JCB and was just taking it all down as it went, you know. So it was very apocalyptic, I remember, on some nights.
And down there, the yellow mechanical digger, which in the early hours of the morning, in a horrifying scene, was commandeered by a howling mob. It swung round, it attacked the police lines, it was driven into parked cars.
My dad stopped the riots at one point, and so they could get all the old folks out of the hospital. I can remember that bit, but after that I think my mum sent me home. He was community youth leader, and he was respected by a lot of people in the area, and he was known by the police as well for like doing good things in the area, getting them involved, people from the area involved with the police playing football. And he had words with the police and had words with the rioters, and they both agreed to stop, and they stopped for like so long, and let even the rioters were helping the people from the hospital get the old people out the hospital.
Well, as they were taking the old age pensioners out, the police came in about 50 odd taxis, and they came up the back of this parkway here, and then tried to sort of form some kind of pincer movement and trap the rioters in this 50-yard space here. Well, it didn't work because the people saw that was what was happening back there and forced the police back onto Princess Avenue, because all the police were at that end by that point. And the evacuation, which was here, carried on, you know.
A chief inspector asked me, would I escort an ambulance in? Apparently some old woman had a heart attack on this estate here. Whilst walking in front of the ambulance, right, I mean, this typifies the attitude which I find incomprehensible. Whilst walking in front of the ambulance, a police van drove past, and a guy shouted out the window, "You black bastard." Where's the sense in that? I just, you know, that is as much nonsense as the 20 or 30 policemen who attacked these girls on the step tonight. I just couldn't believe it. I think incidents like that, I think, demonstrate the incompetence of the Chief Constable, Mr. Oxford. I say incompetence because that is not the way you police any community.
And next door to Stanley House there was a car rental place, locally black-owned place. A Jamaican guy owned it, Mr. Beaver.
Yeah.
And he's a fierce individual. Nobody would mess with him on a one-to-one, you know. But his cars were all taken. About 20 cars taken from his brand new Nissan cars at the time. They were all taken and used as, you know, battering rams against the police lines. I remember his nephew stepping forward. He was only a little midget fella, you know, and he said to the crowd, no, it's my uncle's place, leave it, you know. He's a nice guy, you know. And somebody said, get out the effing way, you know, he's insured, isn't he, you know, and that's it. He just, you know, popped the locks and took the cars, you know. People were driving cars at the police lines also. You know, people who steal cars and rally about, you know, obviously. But people were driving at the police lines and then skidding the car and then somehow doing a Stultman's roll out of the car and then letting the car sideways on, hit the police lines. You know, very dangerous sort of stuff. They could kill themselves, obviously. So there was lots of, you know, crazy things going on. Very, very crazy things.
Once again, the police are beginning to move up Parliament Street. They brought in tear gas for the first time and have already fired off several canisters.
CS gas had been used in mainland Britain for the first time, but the only supplies available to police were shotgun rounds, suitable only for barricade penetration. A manufacturer's warning specifically ruled out their use in public areas. The cartridges caused terrible injuries among those who were hit.
And this is where a chap was shot, just at the side there, at the side of the Caribbean railings. He was shot in the chest with a CS cartridge and followed up by another CS cartridge into his back. You know, so that when he went to hospital, it appeared that he had one wound, but they were just slightly misaligned. So bad marksman there, you know.
I witnessed, I would say, 98% of the rioting through all the days which went on. Well, I was there when the CS gas bullets or whatever they call, I don't know what they call, but I was there when they went off, so to speak, and seeing the effects of them. I never actually seen anybody hit. But to me, I thought the water mains had bust, etc. And I realised that was CS gas. What to me, though, is more pertinent is whether or not that CS gas should have been used at the time it was used. From what I'm aware of is that before any action like that can be taken, permission has to be granted by the Home Secretary. As far as I could see, the riot had come to an end. So in terms of the actual rioting and the conflict between the people and the police, it had really come to an end by the time it came up by the Rialto. The police claim that the CS gas was used to prevent people entering into the Liverpool city centre, and that was never ever the intention of anyone I could see in those riots. In fact, people were sitting down on steps and etc. when the gas went off. I would claim that there was periods during the riots when justifiably, I suppose from a police perspective, that CS gas could have been used. I just felt at the stage when it was used, it should not have been used at all.
It made people a lot more angry because, you know, don't forget, these people are attacking the police because of how they've been treated over the years. And now the police are actually starting to shoot. So that brings out another, it's then things step up another gear, another level. You know, that's why I believe there were so many police sent to hospital in this situation, whereas in other cities people burned vehicles, police vehicles and buildings. In Liverpool they attacked the man on the ground, you know. The police get pushed down to the Science Church, which is on Hope Street, and then the police finally then start to use the weapons and then chase the crowd back up to the Rialto, and then the crowd held the Rialto again for another couple of hours, and then the people started to wander off, getting bored. So therefore the numbers dwindled, the police attacked them and then run them up to the Caribbean Centre. And then up to Kingsley Road, and then it kind of disappeared then. And then the fight went into the Granby Street and all the housing estates, and then there was groups of 20 police just chasing anybody you can, you know. But they only did that knowing full well that people had been, you know, tired of fighting all night and were actually going home. So the police would only start that type of manoeuvre at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, you know, when they're relatively sure that there wouldn't be too many people resisting and waiting for them and all this kind of stuff. So it was just sort of like a mopping up operation of the police's, really, to see if they could, you know, increase the arrest rate, because they couldn't do it while the fighting was on, obviously. So they used to come around and mop up and then they'd arrest individuals, you know, and really give them a hard time. the bank, that West Bank. It's on fire with the Greek church behind it. Obviously you can see all the destruction. I suppose the bank was just another symbol. It stood for money, it stood for capitalism, it stood for the very thing that excludes us.
My feelings were the worst night was on the Sunday night. That's when the fires and that was started in different premises down Parliament Street. Parliament Street was just absolutely one block. The police towards the riverside and the other people there, and it was just one massive confrontation. They started, I believe, at the top of Parliament Street when the firing started, which was the Hanson's Dairy, and they came further and further down, and just doing paces at random.
But far from being random, there was a clear and deliberate pattern to the arson attacks. The bank was burned, but the hospital was evacuated. And the rioters always appeared to have their reasons for burning one particular building, while leaving a neighbouring property untouched.
Yeah, that's the Rialto on fire. I was there, I was right by, to the left. You can see it's well underway. Obviously the roof has collapsed and it's all really going up as a tinderbox. The Rialto was burnt because they were seen as, people who took from the area and gave nothing back. Took.
Well, I couldn't get down there quick enough, could I? Or I might be able to put the fire out, but, it's just wishful thinking. He stood no chance. It was just blazing and nobody could put it out.
I was really shocked when they burned down Swain Banks. I was really shocked because the Rialto, as Swain Banks was always an institution. It was originally the cinema of Toxteth, and not only was it a cinema, but it was also a ballroom as well. And basically, that's where we used to go to boogie. That was our main sort of social point, And when they burned down Swain Banks, boy, I just found I was astonished.
We were just round the corner, just to the other side of where the main doorway was, behind the police line. All the crowds were this way, throwing the petrol bombs, burning cars, just running riot. The bank was blazing, the Rialto was blazing, flames every window. It was just heartbreaking to see it. It's just sad.
Everybody seemed to get on with each other, And when it happened, it was a culture shock.
Really?
We didn't expect it, did we, really? I don't think we did, anyway. People you knew, black and white, I've known them all my life, And when they all start throwing bricks and petrol bombs, it people you don't expect it, do you?
The Swain Banks people were very surprised, that they were targeted and burnt out. And they actually saw themselves as part of the community, which was a bit ironic because they'd only ever taken from the community. They'd never give anything to it at any point. Not that I've ever seen, anyway.
1 square mile of havoc and destruction, burned out buildings, looted...
The Gladway obviously is a locally black-owned business. The 2 ladies who operate the premises are very popular people within the area. So yeah, nobody was ever going to burn there.
It was a strip club every day, which was nearly all men. Once 7 o'clock came, it was a different club. It became a family club of every nationality. You didn't know they were going to do the Gladway or not, I don't know, but they didn't. Why, I don't know. People used to
I know why it was the best club in the area.
But also they had their lads or men or whatever, defending the place to keep rioters away. Because as I say, there was a lot of agitators there and people who didn't understand anything and they just wanted to burn everything in the sight.
On the Sunday, we booked a christening and we asked the person would she cancel the christening, and she said, well, I don't really want to. I don't think it'll affect them. They won't come in the club. At least your club will be protected, somebody's in. So I just said, okay then, if you've made all these arrangements and people were coming out, I said, come. But it was horrendous, really, So
out of desperation, I would like to say, children of the
say, there were many theatres going on. There was Lodge Lane, of course, going on, and that was getting looted wholesale, and buildings were being burnt wholesale, and people were taking things away in vehicles, taxis, buses, anything that they could get. You know, I remember seeing an old lady take half of a cow in a trolley, you know, from the quick save or whatever at the time, you know. And she just took this half a cow home, you know. And I thought, well, you know, she might get half a leg off that and have to throw the rest away, do you know what I mean? But that's how it was there. It was just crazy.
I received a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning telling me that the store had been broken into and there was looters, but the police advised not to come down as there would be no point. I would say a great deal was theft and very little is just throwing the stuff around.
Lodge Lane was looted by people who were not, I believe, genuinely rioters. I know that's a contradiction in terms, but there were people there for economic reasons. There were a lot of other people there for, you know, social reasons, you know, which is like the difference.
You couldn't go near the shops because there's just a mad gang, and they had hatchets and everything down there.
Hatchets?
Yeah, just to try and break locks off window guards and all that, you know. And they were just running at the doors, jumping at them, going through. No one could stop them.
What is your estimate of the damage this morning?
Yeah, right off for sure.
Right.
Right. Finished. Right. Can't come back here no more.
I don't remember hearing anybody within this community condemning any of the people who'd been involved in that at all, feeling that. I mean, I think if anything, there probably was despair rather than anger at the people who took part. And I think there was an understanding of the frustration.
The unresolved dilemma that I have never worked out is whether violence is ever justified. And it's all very well for the academics to sit round the corner here and say, oh no, no, no. But if you're a human being and you are deprived of your rights as a human being and nobody will listen, do you just turn the other cheek or do you fight? And I backed the rioters. I didn't back rioting, but the rioters, because I knew they had no other option. Nobody would listen. Nobody would learn from their example. They faced extinction as human beings, and therefore I would justify the riots. Immediately after Mrs. Thatcher had visited us, and she never got out of her car to speak to anybody, she drove around, but she didn't ask us what we thought. It's just as well, perhaps. And she went away and took advice, and they said, oh, well, these are young people with nothing to do. Give them a nice youth sports centre. The story goes on. The one we lick our lips over is Heseltine, who got 23 million out of Mrs. Thatcher, which was wonderful of him. But he didn't ask us what he should spend it on. He went away and spent it. And he spent it on a beautiful, marvellous riverside garden festival to which nobody could afford to go. So that was 23 million. And nobody locally was employed. They were outside contractors who bussed in their labour force every day. And we used to stand outside the wire fence pressing our noses against it, trying to see were there any blacks employed. And in all that labour force, we observed 2.
Have you got any family here?
Yes.
Yes. Have they got jobs?
Yes, they've all got jobs. No, job today.
What was that?
I don't know what it's doing, but it's off Mill Street.
It's a job.
It is a job, it's not a scheme.
Yeah.
Oh, my brother doesn't have some work. They've been trying to get work for ages.
Have they had any luck?
No.
They knew, because they lived in London, they knew what it was like in Toxteth. And they're going to do the same in Oldham. They've all gone there, all the top dogs and cars and lunches and everything. And they never included a Pakistani.
The reactions to the riots, I never felt that they actually dealt with what the issue was. And the issue at the time was the relationship between Merseyside police. Of course, there was deprivation. Of course, there was unemployment. All of those things had existed, in 1920, 1930, 1940, etc. So I don't feel that they ever got to the bottom of why they took place.
But there are many in Liverpool 8 who feel there was a much deeper reason behind the riots. The same reason why one particular building was targeted by the rioters who razed it to the ground. The building was the exclusive Rackets Club in Liverpool's Upper Parliament Street.
The famous Rackets Club, there was always like the mysterious rackets, So when it got burned, people burnt it with a relish because, it was another place that they'd never been able to go into in their own area, It was just like for middle class people and upwards, I suppose. It represented upper class exclusivity. So that had to be banned. Symbolically, that had to be banned. That had to go, because that was we used to see upper class people in pinstripes and in Rolls Royces and Jaguars going in there and all this kind of thing, And they'd be looking at you like something on the shoe, So, yeah, that place had to go. Because as soon as people went in it, somebody set fires straight away. And then people started to bring out like valuable things, like massive paintings, like sort of 12-foot square or something like that, of great scenes from the Victorian era or the Indian Raj or something like that, And they were bringing out like ivory tusks and great pieces of silver salvers and things like that, and all crockery and trophies and medals of one sort or another, solid silver and all that kind of stuff. So when people started to bring these things out, they realised that there was a lot of valuable things in there, but obviously it was too late because the fire had been set. So they burned the place first, and then as an afterthought, it was looted.
The Rackets Club had become a perfect target for the rage of the rioters, a symbol for many of the part Liverpool had played in the enslavement of their ancestors.
Although Liverpool came into the slave trade later than Bristol and London, when they did come in, they came in with a vengeance, and they took control and became the major slave trading port in Europe. In that, there were more slave ships leaving here than anywhere else in Europe.
The walks are about slave trade connections. We're just going to go around a very small part of the city's connections to the transatlantic slave trade. A very small part, because the whole of Merseyside, the whole of Britain was connected with the slave trade.
The benefits gained from the slave trade, and the benefits weren't only personal to the individual traders, who became enormously wealthy. And really it helped to re-establish the aristocracy too, who were able to rebuild their country houses, and they had tremendous wealth. But it also, as one begins to study and learn of the key figures involved in the slave trade, you realise the extent to which the slave trade played an enormous role in the development of the Industrial Revolution in Britain. The money financed the infrastructure, it financed the canals, the railways, banks, the setting up of insurance companies. Most of them had their life, or started their life, in and around Liverpool.
It's Thames from the fact that Liverpool was built on slavery. This house where you're interviewing was built by a man who made his money out of providing ships to transport black Africans to America. And that taints Liverpool to this day. And that's the real reason why there were Toxteth riots, and that's the real reason why Oldham has a riot, and why protest will go on. You cannot exclude human beings and hang a label round their neck saying inferior, substandard people and expect them to take it. Human race won't tolerate it.
There has to be an even-handed balance. People have to be allowed to live and develop and grow, not just live and survive. This is what this is all about. You know, as far as I can see, a lot of people haven't been able to survive and grow in the 20 years. I wouldn't say the conditions were ripe for another riot. The conditions have not been ameliorated, I think the word is.
It's a melting pot now. Because you look into families, and if families want to be honest, I think there's a black in almost every family in Liverpool. I'm black, and I'll tell you what, I'm one woman to be proud to be black. I'm black and proud, and I should die black and proud. And I'm not racist because I've got 2 white daughters-in-laws. They are good daughters-in-laws, they're good mothers, and the good wives, and their families are excellent. And I don't see a person as a colour. I see a person as a person. I'm black, but it's not every black man I'm going to let come over my door. And at the same time, it's not every white man I'm going to allow over my door.
They're not getting to the root of the problem at all. It doesn't matter how much, like you said, it doesn't matter how much money you spend putting up trees or building a sports centre that may or may not be maintained. If you're not getting to the actual people's attitudes, you ain't doing nothing, because it'll always be the same, and there'll always be the same pressures, especially the police force. You've got to get right to the core, you know.
I think at the bottom of it all, the secret of it all is you cannot deny people the aspirations. Deny people the aspirations, and sooner or later, things blow. It's as easy and simply as that.
1 square mile of havoc and destruction, burned out buildings, looted shops, fires still burning on what you can only describe as a wild orgy of destruction which gripped Toxteth throughout the night. This morning, fire crews and police were saying that the trouble was spreading, and there you see it. Right below us now.
Listen to the voices and we'll make it clear just what's really going down today. In Liverpool, 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 yeah.